Hi, and welcome to In Search of Insight, Nootropics Depot's monthly podcast. I'm your podcast host, Erica, and sitting next to me is our product specialist at Nootropics Depot, Emil.
Hey everyone.
And we're also joined by our science director, Ellie. Welcome, Ellie, to the podcast.
Hi, everyone. Happy to be back.
So today, the three of us are going to be talking about Lucidimax, and this is our Red Reishi optimized stack. And this is something that Emil and I have both taken. Ellie, you've taken it as well, right?
I have. I'm not taking it today, but I have taken it before.
Cool. So we're going to talk to you about the effects. We're going to talk to you about the ingredients that are in the product, of course, but even more importantly, we're going to talk about the science behind this product and why we decided to make an optimized version of a Red Reishi product. Because for those of you who like Red Reishi and are familiar with the mushroom catalog from Nootropics Depot, we do have some other Red Reishi products, but this one is very special and it's used for some specific purposes, which we're going to talk about at length in this podcast, as well as testing results and why it's important that this is actually containing the ganoderic acids that it claims to. Ganoderic acids, I'll say that
Yes.
clearly.
And triterpenes,
And
which
triterpenes.
ganoderic acids are triterpenes, so we can also just refer to them as triterpenes. But at some point, we'll split them apart and talk about them individually, and that's of course why Ellie is here, because we're going to be looking at some chromatograms. We're going to get into the nitty-gritty science of it, because there is a lot of science behind a product like this, and I do think that's important to rehash again and again, especially when it comes to mushrooms, because the state of the mushroom supplements is not great. Ellie and I can definitely get into that, especially Ellie now. She's been at a lot of these conferences and seen the inner workings, and there's some stuff
Mhm.
happening there that's not
Especially with
necessarily going
Rishi
in, yeah,
too. Yeah.
especially with Rishi. Because it seems like with a lot of these mycelium on grain products, they might be producing some sort of compounds, but it just doesn't seem to be working for the ganoderic acids. And unfortunately, and fortunately for us in this case, the ganoderic acids are the main bioactive molecules in reishi. Those are the most studied. We know what they do. We know that we want those in there. But
Mhm.
apparently, the mycelium on grain process is just not getting a lot of it out there. That's a bit strange. We'll look at some of that testing later. Can maybe even talk about some behind the scenes work we've done on that. But uniquely for, I think, our reishi products is that they do tend to contain a lot of ganoderic acids. We don't see that with other reishi products on the market. And we think that's because we work with Chinese manufacturers, farmers that have been growing this mushroom for a very long time. There's a lot of knowledge on how to grow this mushroom. And from what we see, they're burying logs that have been inoculated with reishi outdoors, and it's growing out of soil with temperature fluctuations and humidity fluctuations, and there's probably some bacteria and yeast in the air that poses a threat to the mushroom. And as a response, they seem to produce more ganoderic acid. And we see this in the one-to-one non-extracted uh, Ganoderma lucidum or reishi that we have, and that has, I think, 0.5% of ganoderic acids in there now.
Mhm.
Maybe Ellie knows a bit more there.
Yeah, something right around there. I
Off the
think it
top
is
of your head, but
0.5%.
yeah, 0.5%, which is quite high. It seems
Mhm.
like a low number, but then when you look at some of the other rishis on the market and even some extracts that we have looked at and other uh, non-extracted rishis, we see lower amounts. So 0.5% is a really good starting point, and then when you work together with really good extractors, you can get those levels up to really mind-blowing levels, and that's kind of what happened with Lucidimax. We targeted very high levels of ganoderic acids, but also high levels of beta-glucans, which we'll get into why that's the case a little bit later. As with every podcast that we do, we like to take the Lucidimax. It's the morning for Ellie right now, so maybe not the best time for her to be taking Lucidimax because it is quite calming and it is quite good for sleep. So we'll talk about that too. I personally am do really good with calming supplements, but I do have to say the Lucidimax is really calming. So we're going to take it. If
Mhm.
you notice me slowing down a little bit halfway through the podcast when it starts kicking in, you know why. I'm gonna have a really good night of sleep tonight. I know that for sure because right now it's 7:30 p.m. here, so it's a little bit later. After this podcast, we're probably can have a little snack and go to bed. So I can maybe report at another date that my sleep was good. Or probably in the podcast premiere chat, you can
Yeah.
we can have a little discussion about how my sleep was this night. So let's take some. The serving is 2 capsules.
Yes.
And because it is so calming and I don't want to fall asleep on this podcast, we're also not going to double dose this one. It probably is quite nice to double dose it, but for now, I want to stay mentally clear. Uh, Another important thing to mention right away is that there's 2 capsules. So if the full serving, which is 2 capsules, is too much for you, you can always just take one, which also makes it a more economical product. And even if you take a single capsule of this, it's still going to be stronger than pretty much every Reishi product out there, including probably even our one-to-one non-extracted Reishi, but we'll have to do a bit of math on there. Anyways,
Cheers.
cheers.
Let's take it.
I'm drinking our Mushroom Magic Baller latte right now because it's morning for me. And if I were to take Lucidimax, I would do no work for the rest of the day and can't can't get away with that one.
So it's really, really relaxing. And
Yeah.
I often gravitate towards calming supplements, but this one was also like so relaxing and so powerful that I thought, ooh, I'm gonna be sure not to take this during the day because it was so intense that it kind of took a bit of my motivation away on the afternoon that I took it, the full dose. However, I was feeling a little bit under the weather, and I know from past experience with the Rishi one-to-one that that was really helping with my respiration. That was just helping me breathe deeper and also sleep better. So last week I took the Lucidimax a couple of days in a row, and I have to say it really helped with my sleep for sure. And part of that is with breathing as well, and being able to breathe with my mouth closed, especially if I'm a bit congested. So I do think that this one helped me in my general respiration and recovery. But I was taking it specifically at night.
Well, and a few times during the day, because I noticed you were getting sick, so I said, "Hey, try some Lucidimax. It might boost your immune system." And you took it that
Hmm.
afternoon, and you, I think, took a nap for like 2 hours,
Yeah.
which, under normal circumstances, not the best thing maybe during the day. But if you're feeling sick and you need a bit of extra sleep, and a bit of immune enhancement. It can be nice to actually take the Lucidimax and take a nap, get some more sleep in, take it again in the evening, get a bit of better sleep, and really kickstart that recovery process. And you really seemed like you were on the edge of a pretty nasty cold,
Hmm.
and it just seemed like it never went there.
Yeah. I was able to avoid it, which was good with a lot of sleep and the Lucidimax and tons of water.
And
So
also things like infinigreens, and we take a
yeah,
lot of
this
immune
helped.
enhancers, but Lucidimax definitely seems to kickstart things a little bit, which makes sense. There's a lot of research on reishi being good for immune function and inflammation, so it helps both with symptoms and it helps with recovery and maybe even has like a bit of a, well, I can't say that word, but it pushes the bad stuff away. Let's say that.
Keep it general.
Yeah.
Okay, but aside from relaxation and sleep benefits and respiration benefits, what are the other benefits that we typically see with ganoderic acid?
Yeah, so really sleep and mood, I think those are the two biggest one and maybe stress as well. And
Mhm.
then we see the anti-inflammatory effects and we see some antioxidant effects and we see some positive effects on, for example, joint health, which makes sense if you're taking something that addresses inflammation, that's usually good for joint health too. Another thing we see is that things like seasonal allergies sometimes are a little bit better with reishi. Again, it has an inflammation regulating effect. That's probably where that's coming from. It has an immune boosting effect. It also seems to have some longevity effects. And that's what reishi actually is really popular for in China. It's been used for 2,000 years, and I think it's nicknamed the mushroom of immortality. So kind of hints towards its longevity effects. And recent research has shown that it is a senolytic. It does seem to have a positive effect on healthy aging. So that's another interesting use. And I think that's why reishi is probably a little bit popular amongst older individuals as well. It seems to kind of rejuvenate you a little bit. It helps with sleep. And of course, we're also talking about this from the standpoint that I don't experience a lot of daily anxiety anymore. I definitely used to in the past, and something like Lucidimax would have been perfect for shaving the edge off, and it would have kept me actually focused during the day because anxiety can really get in the way of things. So if you then take something that's calming, that's good. So depending on what your scenario is, Lucidimax might actually work really well during the day as just a strong calming agent. And
Hmm.
and again, if it's too strong, you can take a single capsule too. But those really are the main effects of Reishi. And well, one thing I missed is that it has good gut microbiome modulating effects. And that's also, I think, a good jump off point to get into some of the formulation work that we did and some of the analytical work that we did, because there are a few compounds in Reishi that help enhance microbiome health. The main ones are the beta glucans, and we are going to be talking quite a bit probably about beta glucans on this podcast. Beta glucans are really beneficial in mushrooms, but they're basically the same between all mushrooms. I was trying to explain this to you earlier
Yeah.
today. Like you can kind of look at the beta glucans as being the cellulose in the vegetables we eat. It
Mhm.
serves a similar role. For example, our one-to-one non-extracted reishi is 50% beta glucans. So that means a big part of that mushroom is made up of beta glucans. And if you look at the mushroom too, or if you've ever seen it in dried form, it's really tough and woody, and it has a lot of these beta glucans that just make up everything. Just like, if you eat a stick of celery, it's all cellulose, and there's really no almost nutrition in there. I think it even has like anti-calories because you still have to digest it and expend energy on that, but all you're getting really is cellulose. And with a lot of these mushrooms, it's the same thing. All you're getting is these beta glucans. But well, with a lot of mushroom products on the market, all you're getting is beta glucans, and that's a problem because
Mhm.
really what's more interesting about mushrooms are the secondary metabolites, like the ganoderic acids, arenosines, and that really gives the unique character to a mushroom. The beta
Mhm.
glucans are still beneficial because they're kind of like fibers. They can be digested by our gut microbiota, and they can make short chain fatty acids from it, things like butyrate, that is really beneficial to overall gut health. So the beta glucans are there as a prebiotic, and that's really important. And some of the ganoderic acids are gut microbiome modulators. So if you combine very high ganoderic acids and high triterpenes, which we have done, together with high amounts of beta glucans, again, something which we have done in Lucidimax, you get this really nice gut microbiome modulating effect, which can have benefits on weight loss, just general GI comfort. It can have benefits for cognition and mood. There's a lot that we're learning quite recently too about the impact that our gut microbiome has on many different aspects of our life. So I think that's a big focus of Lucidimax too, is the gut microbiome part of it. And that's, I think, a big focus for all mushrooms. But the important thing is that we're going further than beta glucans here. And we've been stuck on beta glucans for a long time. And I think this is maybe a good opportunity to explain why we have been stuck on beta glucans and the rest of the industry has been stuck on beta glucans and why it's so hard to get out of it. And that's
Mhm.
because a lot of those secondary metabolites, there's no reference standards for them. And if there's no reference standards for them, you basically can't see how much of a specific compound is in a specific mushroom product. And we know all about this with Arenimax. If any of you have followed along, we made our own reference standard. You have to be a little bit crazy to do that because it takes a lot of time, money, and effort. There's one person in our lab, and that's kind of what he does. He just makes
Yep.
his reference standards. Like you have to hire an entire person to do that, and someone who is very skilled too. Ellie,
It
maybe
also
you can
takes
speak
a
more to that
lot.
process.
Yeah, reference standards also take a lot of material to make. So it's not like the process of making a reference standard is one, you have to know what standard you want. So we typically rely on like academic literature, people who have done research into these mushrooms before and know there's some relationship between compound X and the effects we're interested in.
Mhm.
But once you know what that compound is, sometimes it can be there in extremely low amounts just because there's correlation between a compound and an effect doesn't mean that it's there in a high enough concentration to make that effect. So you have to do more research into, is this compound logical to even rely on? So
Yeah.
then you have to have enough material to extract that compound. Because if you think, let's say we have a plant leaf, maybe the tiniest amount is that one compound. And then we have to have enough that we can weigh and that we can use and that we can compare to. So having enough material to actually extract to make a reference standard is a big limitation as well, because just a huge financial investment. But that investment pays off because you get higher quality.
Exactly. And then you can test for it. But it's somewhat understandable that not everyone is doing that, but you do need some sort of quality marker. And
Mm-hmm.
all mushrooms contain beta glucans, so that's a pretty easy quality marker. But it's kind of weird too. It would be like, let's say you're developing a new cannabis product and you don't have reference standards for cannabinoids, so you just standardize it on cellulose. It'd be a bit
Right.
weird. Like that is not what we're going after, and that's really the same thing in the mushrooms. The beta glucans are there as a nice placeholder, and we need to move away from the beta glucans. The one thing that the
Yes.
beta glucans have kind of helped us with, but that point is kind of getting lost now with how much people are getting back into mycelium on grain, is that back in the day, people were not being transparent about using mycelium on grain. So what they were doing is they were growing the mycelium on the grains, they were freeze drying or just normally drying the grain with the mycelium on it, and then they were drying that, powdering it, and selling it to people. And then they were standardizing it for total polysaccharides. And you had really high numbers because polysaccharides are also things like the starches in grains. And they were just counting that as bioactives. Another polysaccharide is beta glucans, and that is something that you do want from mushrooms because of the prebiotic effects. But then if you say, oh, it's total polysaccharides and you're counting the alpha glucans, like the starches and the beta glucans, then it doesn't really make sense anymore. So then at a certain point, the industry said, okay, we need to separate those two. We'll test for beta glucans. Okay. And now we can say it's not a total polysaccharide thing anymore. We can focus in on the beta glucans. Good. But now that we're going back to mycelium on grain, we're introducing alpha glucans again, and now kind of the story is being spun in a way. But yeah, after fermentation with the mycelium, those alpha glucans are beneficial too. Maybe. But I think
Mm-hmm.
really the important thing, the important thing that gives character to a lot of these mushrooms are the secondary metabolites, not the polysaccharides. So we need to be better about that. And that's one of the reasons why we developed a reishi testing method that focused on the ganoderic acids and the triterpenes. We were lucky enough that when we tried that on our products, we were seeing ganoderic acids and triterpenes. Not everyone is lucky enough to see that though. And I think an important thing to bring up here is that with the arenosines, there are no commercially existing reference standards. So there is somewhat of an excuse there not to do the testing because not everyone has the capabilities we have of making our own reference standards. That's an
Mm-hmm.
ultra specialized thing that a company can do. It's understandable that not everyone can do that. With the ganoderic acids, it's completely different. We didn't create those ganoderic acid standards. They've been available through major reference standard suppliers for a very long time. And
Mm-hmm.
there really is no excuse not to do that testing. We figured out how to do that testing. We can do that testing for other people. Other labs can easily do that testing. So why isn't it being done? And I think
Right.
it's
Well, and
been,
that testing is not just available, it's a USP, which is the United States Pharmacopoeia approved method. So it's not just available, these standards aren't just available. This method is industry approved and it's passed really rigorous testing. We are currently expanding our method to include more analytes, um, which is pretty expensive to do. But these standards for the USP method are readily available and affordable. And then the USP method has been very rigorously validated. So it's a pretty straightforward method too. It's not like a method that isn't accessible because of the type of instrumentation or the type of method. It's pretty simple method, but most labs also don't have direct relationships with third party testing, so it is pretty expensive to test in general, and that's why looking for COAs and looking for quality labs is really important. People who put the time and energy into testing these methods, even if they're hard.
Yeah. But I would say, for an average consumer, yes, if you have to pay $1,000 to $2,000 in testing for ganideric acids in a batch, that would be a lot of money. But as a company
Mm-hmm.
who's importing 500 kilo batches at a time, 1,000 kilo batches at a time, 10,000 kilo batches at a time, some of these mushroom sellers are operating at very, very, very big volumes, like semi-truck level volumes. Those people have the money to test for the ganideric acids and they're choosing not to. The
Yes,
method is there,
exactly.
the reference standards are there. Like Ellie said, it's a USP method and it's just not being done. And I think it's pretty clear why it's not being done. Um,
Mhm. We have done less extensive market research on reishi
mhm,
products than lion's mane. If you've seen any of our other podcasts talking about lion's mane, we've done quite a bit of research, and that's not always with like the ill intent of we want to prove that we're the best. Well, not that that's ill intent, but it's really because we want to make sure our products are as high quality as we're saying they are. So doing market research allows us to know where in the playing field we are of with these active compounds because we really pride ourselves on high quality products and we really pride ourselves on being the best in the industry, active, offering these products with the highest bioactive compounds. And so market research is required for us to do that. And so we do spend quite a lot of time testing competitor samples. And with Reishi, we're seeing nothing. We are only seeing ganideric acids in one competitor that we've tested so far, and that was Real Mushrooms. And we work pretty closely with them and really like them a lot. They were the only company that had actually measurable ganideric acids. Everything else on the chromatogram just flatline, no peaks at all. And to me, that's saying it's maybe not fruiting body or
mhm.
it's heavily myceliated grain. And difficult to tell what it is without really extensive testing, especially considering that the beta glucan methods are also not very reliable testing methods. So testing competitor samples so far, we're seeing nothing.
That's pretty wild, honestly,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
me, especially I don't know how many products are out there, but it's exploding right now, the whole mushroom world,
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
and especially for people who are less familiar with them. So, if you somehow stumbled upon to this podcast and you are less familiar, now you're going to learn a whole lot. But if you are familiar with the mushroom products from Nootropics Depot and maybe some other brands, hopefully you haven't ordered Red Reishi from those other places because nothing is a total waste of money. That's
Well,
wild.
and that's the thing I do just want to say here. We're not saying it's a total waste of money.
Okay, that's what I said. Tell me, yes, correct me, please.
That is not something we want to be saying here. We don't want to be telling people like, hey, don't buy that product. It's not going to do anything. It's going to be a waste of money. What we can tell you
Hmm.
is that there is no ganideric acids in there. And what we can
Mm-hmm.
also tell you is that from what we can tell in the research is that the ganideric acids are the primary compounds responsible for the effects of reishi. So if those are not there, ask yourself the question, what is there?
Hmm.
Exactly.
You're probably just getting some beta glucans, which will have a
And
beneficial effect, especially if you have some gut dysbiosis and you take a high beta glucan red reishi, you will have beneficial effects. You just won't have those really characteristic effects of red reishi, which seem to depend on the ganideric acids and the triterpenes that are slightly different that you find, for example, in the spores. And those seem to help with mood and sleep. And if it's not there, it doesn't seem to produce those effects. So maybe
mm-hmm.
not a total waste of money. I'm also not saying those products are not doing anything, but if you do, like, let's say we look at a couple of samples of coffee and a few of them just don't have caffeine in there. That would be weird. And you'd be like, why would I drink these? There's no reason for
Exactly.
me to drink decaf coffee. I like the taste of coffee, but I like the effects of caffeine more. I need that caffeine. So if that's not in there, I'm going to be unhappy. And I would say it's probably a similar scenario if someone says, "Hey, the ganaderic acids seem to be really important and they're not in there." I would be a little bit upset as a consumer.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah.
I think that was perfectly summed up. And also, it's beta glucans are important, but beta glucans can be obtained from other methods than just taking a mushroom supplement. So if you're paying a really high price for just beta glucans, that's when you're wasting your money because there are other ways to get just beta glucans.
Yeah.
So they are beneficial and they are something we also are standardizing to in our Lucidimax. We're not saying that beta glucans are bad by any means. They are beneficial. They aren't a great quality marker for the specific effects of specific mushrooms. They are more in general just a mushroom marker.
Yeah. And yeah, maybe there's something in the mycelium on grain because now there's a lot of talk about, yeah, but the mycelium, it ferments all of the carbohydrates in the grains and then it produces stuff. Okay, I can agree with that it produces something, but we need to know what it is and we need to study what those
Mhm.
things are before we start saying, hey, this is going to have the effects of reishi that you see in all of these research studies that use fruiting bodies that probably actually have ganaderic acid in there.
Exactly. And that research is happening. People are doing that research, especially because mycelium on grain is becoming popular again.
Mhm.
And the beta glucan testing methods are not actually applicable to mycelium on grain. The grain interferes with the kind of kits that labs use to test the beta glucans. If you have grain in your sample, then that kit doesn't work anymore. And so, even with the mycelium on grain products that are going to have high beta glucans or claim that they have high beta glucans, the test doesn't work. So, the beta glucans measurements are actually inaccurate. So, standardizing to them works for fruiting bodies, but once you have grain included, that test method doesn't work anymore. So even if it has high beta glucans, you won't even know because the method doesn't work.
Can you maybe explain a little bit how the megazyme, right? How that process works for beta
Yeah,
glucuronidase?
I can give a like kind of general overview. So the Megazyme is the kit. Megazyme is a company that makes testing kits, and they have done a lot of work on this kit. And they're about to come out with a new version of the kit that addresses a bunch of these errors, but it still doesn't really address the grain interference error. But I don't want to discredit Megazyme as a company. It's just this kit doesn't work for the purpose that a lot of people are using it for. So the Megazyme kit measures total glucans first. So you have beta glucans and you have alpha glucans, and it'll measure the total number of glucans. And then it does a kind of conversion that makes it so you can't measure the beta glucans anymore. So then you have a measurement for total glucans, you have a measurement for only alpha glucans, and then you do subtraction to figure out how much beta glucans you have. But when there's grain involved that interferes with the hydrolysis part of it, I believe that's where the interference is. And I can look up and correct in the podcast premiere if I'm incorrect about any part of this, but there the grain interferes with that process. So the conversion is not fully happening, and then you're not getting correct numbers.
Makes sense. But also really complicates things for the mycelium on grain world.
Hmm.
Definitely. And there are some companies that have modified methods, but then when that method is not disclosed, then other companies cannot verify these results. So if we were to go in and test a company's product and get different numbers because they are using a different method without knowing that, then there's no way for other labs to confirm what people are saying about their products. So transparency is really important here to say, this was the number of beta glucans we have using this specific test method. And when there is like the industry accepted method, it's important to disclose if you're using a different method, which no one is doing that.
No.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask about the method that was used for Lucidimax because we talked briefly about that. What was changed and or improved Can you talk a little bit about the method that was used for this product?
So for the beta glucans, we are using the standard Mechazyme kit, but it's for fruiting body only. So we're not having that grain interference. So that kit is reliable when you're using just fruiting body, when there's no grain. So that's how we tested the beta glucan standardized part of it.
Mm.
And then another ingredient that we haven't actually mentioned yet is the reishi spores. So we use broken spores, and that is just standardized to total triterpenes. And the difference between, and Emil will be able to talk about this a little more probably, the total triterpenes and the ganaderic acid measurement is that the spores have different terpenes, different triterpenes than the ganaderic acids. We don't know exactly what they are yet, and that work is actively happening so we can figure out what those triterpenes are and have a more kind of targeted number for the active ingredients in there. But those are separate measurements because they are separate actual compounds in those two ingredients. And
So,
then for the ganaderic acids, we have a totally separate method.
so how does that work with the total triterpenes if we don't know exactly what they are? Can you explain then how we can still arrive at a total triterpenes number?
Mm-hmm. So that's a more general method, and I don't know the exact specifics of the actual method, how they do it, but it's a UV vis method. So instead of measuring based on a standard using UPLC, where typically we have the chromatograms with the different peaks in them, and then we can quantify based on knowing, okay, we added this much of a standard and the peak was this high. That means this peak must be this much of the compound. With UV vis, instead, you're using just the amount of UV light that can pass through a sample. And so it's based on the compound's ability to absorb light. And then if that light isn't released, then there's X amount of that compound that was able to absorb the light. And so for total triterpenes, it's a wavelength of light that the triterpenes can just absorb. And that's how you can measure how much is in there.
Okay. So it would be nice to know exactly what they are. And unfortunately, the research isn't totally there either. We kind of know what some of them
Mm-hmm.
are. We don't know exactly what they're doing. But what I can tell you from beta testing, ganaderic acid heavy ones, like our 9% ganaderic acid reishi, which is made from fruiting bodies, and the lucidispore, which is made from only broken spore extract, which is then done through a supercritical CO2 extraction process to get very high levels of triterpenes. That one, the lucidispore, seems to be a bit more specialized for sleep enhancement. If you take that one, really helps with sleep. The 9% reishi doesn't have that same exact effect for many people that try it. So a lot of them will gravitate more towards Lucidispore if they're using it more for sleep, or more towards the Reishi 9% if they're using it more for mood enhancement, hair regrowth, antioxidant, anti-inflammatory type of effects. But, and I think this is uh, something we haven't touched on yet either with Lucidimax, is that we have a bunch of different reishi extracts in here. So
Mm-hmm.
we have, well, and non-extracts. So the biggest bulk of it actually is our non-extracted reishi, which has a lot of beta glucans. So that's delivering 200 milligrams of beta glucans. So that's a nice prebiotic boost to then help some of the ganaderic acids with their microbiome modulating effects. And then we have 150 milligrams, I believe. Yes, 150 milligrams of the reishi broken spore powder. So in the lucidospore, we have the we break the cells of the spores and then we extract it with supercritical CO2. Here we're going a more full spectrum approach and we're just breaking the spores down and then we have a powder. We're not extracting it. So everything that's inside of the spores, including some fatty acids and proteins and all sorts of interesting stuff, and then the triterpenes, that's all preserved in there. And then on top of that, we have our is it the Rishi 9% or is it an even stronger one? I think this might have been an even stronger batch, right?
Mm-hmm. It was an even stronger batch.
Yeah.
So when we work with our suppliers, we probably have a unique relationship with suppliers compared to other companies where we actually work with them one-on-one for product development. And so, it's an ongoing relationship of, we'll suggest something of how to improve a product and then they'll try it or they'll try something else. It's very interactive. And so they were originally supplying us a reishi 9% ganaderic acids, and we had a batch that tested really high. It was like 14% or
Wow.
something. And we tested it a bunch of times. We got like a few different lots of it to make sure that it wasn't just a fluke. And it just was that this research that they've been doing, and we've been partnering with them on, has allowed us to have really high ganaderic acid producing mushroom.
Yeah.
And so I think it was around 14% is where it was testing at.
Which is really mind blowing that you can
Really
get
huge.
such
Yeah.
levels. We've never seen anything like that. We were really impressed when we got the first 9% batch in many years ago. We were really like, how did you guys pull this off? And now it's even higher. It's
Yes.
almost doubling.
And it's continuing to increase too.
Yeah.
So we would never make a claim that we can't test and verify on like multiple batches, multiple lots. But I will say that the number might change in the future on what we're standardizing to, both because we're working on expanding the method to include more ganaderic acids in the testing method, and because the supplier is working really hard to make sure that they're producing the most ganaderic acids in their mushroom possible.
So how many ganaderic acids are we currently testing for then?
So we're currently testing for 10, and that's what's in the
Okay.
USP method. And then we're expanding it to include, I believe, an extra 3.
Okay.
And one of those peaks is quite high. So it should increase our standardization quite a bit, just including that peak.
Nice.
And we're trying to include more as well. The process is a little slower because we have to identify each peak via mass spec, try to find a standard that matches that peak so we can confirm the identity. And then we have to come up with a method for integrating all these peaks into one, but that's ongoing. And I don't want to go into too much details about that because we're still working on the method, but soon it will be like a fully validated, expanded method to include more ganaderic acids and have a more accurate number.
Nice. I think that's also an interesting thing to discuss a little bit is that when we say ganaderic acids, it's not all the ganaderic acids, because I believe there's like over 100, close to 170 different ganaderic acids. So if we were in some fantasy world able to actually test for 170, that 14% might become 34% or who knows, or even higher.
Exactly.
Um,
And that's still, even if we expand this method to include more ganaderic acids, that doesn't negate the fact that our competitors still have nothing. So with ours, we're identifying peaks that we're seeing. We just don't know what they are yet.
mhm.
Where that won't make our competitors that have nothing have more because they still don't have any peaks.
Can we pull up some examples of like one of our
Yeah,
chromatograms and maybe one of the competitors?
perfect.
Mhm.
Okay, so this is our reishi that it's 9%/14%/high ganaderic acids. We'll leave it at high. And this is what is used in the Lucidimax. And we can see pretty high peaks. So it's important to look at this number over here. This is atomic units. This is just kind of like a relative intensity of these peaks. Like how high are these peaks relative to each other?
Mhm.
And we see some pretty big peaks. Um, and I do have one pointing to where we're adding more peaks, but this is one of the peaks we're adding to the expanded method. So that's like a
Okay.
pretty substantial peak to add.
Mhm. So for
And
those
then
that
here's one of our
don't
competitors.
have okay, yeah, that's pretty shocking. Ooh. And bigger peak generally means there's more of it in there, right?
More.
Yeah.
Yeah, taller and wider typically means more.
Okay. So
So
what is
we've
going
got
on
nothing
here?
here. We've got nothing here. And then we do have stuff here. So this is real mushrooms
Okay.
that I mentioned. They do have stuff and
Mhm.
they have about 1% ganaderic acids, which is really good. It's a lot
Yeah,
better
that's
than we're
solid.
seeing in a lot of stuff. It's better than our 1-to-1 extract. So they have a substantial amount of ganaderic acids. And so we really enjoy working with them as a company.
Mhm.
And then these are the peaks that we're expanding. So we're adding this peak, as I mentioned. This peak right here, we're also adding this peak. We've done more work on identifying, and we might change the identity of this peak. And then this is ganaderic acid F right now. So this would add one more peak because ganaderic acid F has shifted to a different peak identity. And that's like really nitty gritty kind of stuff that might be a little too much to get into right now. But that's what the expanded method will include. And then we're working on still identifying this peak and some of these other little ones.
Cool. So I think this really demonstrates, like maybe for some people that don't have a lot of background in this, it might seem like we're fishing for a higher number. And in essence, yeah, we want to see higher levels, but it's not like we're making it up. It's there. We just
Right.
can't see it yet. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to see it. And if you look at those two peaks that Ellie was just showing us, those are significant. That could really add maybe a few percent more to the ganideric acid level, or like maybe 1% or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's always interesting with analytics. It's never actually telling the full truth because knowing the full truth, we would need to be able to know all of those peaks, and that's a process. So I think as we
Mm-hmm.
develop this method more and more, we will get closer to the true number of ganideric acids in there. But as Ellie said, you do have to have something there, and in our competitors, we
Exactly.
just don't see anything there. And if we look at the real mushrooms one, you kind of see they also have those two peaks, it looks like.
Mm-hmm. Right here.
Smaller, kind of looks like they're in the same position, right?
Yep.
So if once we figure that out and we start testing our product, the real mushrooms product will also test higher because it's there. Um,
Exactly.
yeah. But that's always really interesting with analytics, and it's something, with Arenimax, it has 0.5% adenosine A, and that might not seem like a whole lot for a single compound. Yeah, it isn't a ton, but if you then consider it one compared to all of the competitors, it actually does contain adenosine A, so 0.5% then becomes really impressive. But then if you look beyond just adenosine A and consider that there are a lot of other compounds there, if we look at a chromatogram of Arenimax, we see a similar thing where you see a few peaks.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can figure out what those peaks are, and maybe those peaks are also adenosines, and then we can integrate those, then maybe that goes up to 1.5%, 2%, and then it starts becoming much more significant. But there's always something that's still missing and something that we need to develop. And I think that's why it's also so exciting to be in this industry because a lot of these things haven't been done yet. So we're really kind of at the forefront of figuring out how to analyze these products. And that's, yeah.
And we're lucky to work for a company that wants to do it. So we
Yeah.
get to really be involved in that science because I think not every company, but definitely there are companies out there that just buy something from a contract manufacturer and sell it and don't really care about the science
Mhm.
or don't have the means to do the science. And we're really lucky to have a company that the culture of the company is science first. And if we had started using this method and we had tested our product and saw that there was no ganideric acids, we would have still probably disclosed that information and gone and found a better supplier and done the work to find. And then we've had that happen before where there wasn't a method before. We work really hard to develop a method and then we test our product and we're like, oh, maybe this wasn't the quality we thought it was. And then we go and find a better supplier.
Yeah. And I think that's really the benefit of analytics if you have that capability. And yeah, maybe not everyone has the means for it, but I think if you are buying from a company that's an established brand, they're probably making millions of dollars at this point. Like some of the stuff that we see behind the scenes, like one recent brand who makes a mushroom coffee, we found out that they're selling $7 million worth of their mushroom coffee per month per month
Per
on
month.
TikTok. And that's only on TikTok shop. So if they can spend, there's money coming in. Like this analysis is a few $100s, a few $1,000s at the very, very most. And then you can do
Mm-hmm.
everything. You can do heavy metals, you can do bioactives, you can do common adulterants, all this kind of stuff. Because that's another thing with the beta glucans. Beta glucans are also in yeast. Yeast is a lot cheaper than mushrooms.
Mm-hmm.
Put two and two together. A
exactly.
lot of the beta-glucans are probably yeast derived and there's spiking, adulteration happening. It's important to know that kind of stuff.
Mhm. And
But
a lot of
yeah,
it
if you're
does come
making
to,
7 million a month, then
yeah.
fuck
And a
cares.
lot of it comes to consumer education too. Consumers have to ask for it. If not, then why would a brand do it? If people are going to
Yep.
buy it anyways, why would they test? Just, that makes sense. So it comes to consumer education. So that's like a big goal of ours too, is to, if you're going to go buy someone else's product because you think it's better than ours, power to you. That's totally fine. But we want to give you the tools that you need to ask for the evidence that it is better.
Yeah,
And, us providing that information on how to ask these questions means that the industry gets better as a whole.
absolutely. Yeah.
So to take a slightly less scientific approach, I'm curious what you're feeling right now with the Lucidimax in your system now for about 45 minutes.
It's still pretty mild. I think this one might take a little bit longer to kick in. Um, but I'm starting to feel a little bit of relaxation, maybe. But I've also been in such an engaging conversation with Ellie. I haven't really taken a moment to kind of sit back and take it in.
Yeah,
Which, now that I'm focusing on it, there's definitely something calming going on. What about for
nice.
you?
I feel it too. I feel like it's just generally calming. It's not quite as dramatic as the first time that I took it, just in terms of the
Mhm.
perceptible benefits.
Mhm.
Um, but I do feel like it's calming and it's a little bit muscle relaxing too,
Yeah, I
I
was
think.
wondering, like, sometimes it gets a little bit warmer while we're recording with the lights on
Hmm.
and everything, but I'm feeling like more of an internal warmth, like my
Yeah.
muscles are relaxing a little bit, that kind of feeling, which
Hmm.
is quite interesting.
Yeah.
Um, Probably has some like calcium channel blocker effects. That's with that muscle relaxation. It feels like it doesn't feel very strongly GABAergic, but it is still GABAergic. There's a lot of interesting things going on with Reishi actually in terms of its pharmacology. We've always said like we don't fully understand what it's doing for sleep because it doesn't feel like a classical GABAergic supplement, not like Eclonia cava, which kind of knocks you out, and it is more of a GABAergic or magnolia bark or lemon balm. Those are all GABAergics. It's also not like L-tryptophan. L-tryptophan is a serotonergic, so it increases serotonin levels, and that can increase melatonin levels a little bit, and that can have a calming effect and help you with sleep. But there's something weird going on with Reishi where it kind of has a little bit of those GABAergic effects and it kind of has a little bit of those serotonergic effects. And I was doing some research into that this afternoon, trying to figure out, can I find a unique mechanism for it? And there was an interesting study where they were dosing rats with DOI. This is a very common 5-HT2A agonist. It's a psychedelic drug, but it's mostly used in research as a 5-HT2A agonist. And when you give rats a 5-HT2A agonist, they kind of do this with their head. You call it the head twitch response. So that's how you know something is acting on the 5-HT2A receptor. They don't totally know why that happens, but anyways, you give a rat DOI, for example, it starts twitching its head. Now, if you give that rat something that blocks 5-HT2A, that head twitch response goes away. And they did a study where they took Reishi, gave it to rats who were having the head twitch response with DOI, and it blocked the head twitch response, which means that likely something in Reishi is acting as a serotonin 5-HT2A antagonist. And if you look up the research, if you antagonize the 5-HT2A receptor, you have better deep sleep and you have better REM sleep. When you agonize it, you see the opposite. So that's probably where it's coming from. You also see in 5-HT2A agonism that people sometimes get a little bit more on edge. They're taking in a lot more sensory information. They can probably process a bit more sensory information, but that can also lead to a little bit of edginess. And if you then block the 5-HT2A receptor, that seems to have a really beneficial effect for calming people down and improving their mood. And that's probably why Reishi also has this effect where it's really calming and it can help you sleep. It might be coming through that 5-HT2A receptor, which is really interesting, especially when you consider that when you are sleep deprived, your body actually or your brain upregulates the 5-HT2A receptors. And it seems that Red Reishi taken during the day, if you have had a bad night of sleep, has a bit of a anti-fatigue effect. Maybe that's also coming through that 5-HT2A mechanism, but I thought that was really interesting and kind of explains maybe why Lucidimax and the spore oil, Lucidaspore, and other reishi products have such a unique sleep increasing effect or sleep enhancing effect, and that it just doesn't really feel like anything else. And that's also something I'm feeling now. Like it, we're quite familiar with GABAergics like
Hmm.
Eclonia cava and supercritical coriander. Eric and I are a big fan of GABAergics, and I would say this doesn't really feel that GABAergic.
Not as dramatic as a lot of the other products that we've taken.
Hmm.
Yeah,
But even though it's not as dramatic, it does seem to have a really relaxing effect, and it
totally.
does seem to have a really sleep enhancing effect too.
Yeah.
So,
I do feel like the tingles of a GABAergic is
mm,
something happening because it's relaxing and it makes my eyelids feel heavy. That's what I
yeah,
always notice.
yeah.
But it's quite subtle compared to other products. I wanted to ask also, um, perhaps maybe Ellie or Emil know what Rishi product is in the Mushroom Magic Matcha blend. Or sorry, the Mushroom Magic Latte
We
blend.
don't have any Rishi in there.
Oh, okay. There's no Rishi in there.
Yeah,
Okay.
and part of the reason, here, let's actually try this. You need to taste this because those
Ooh.
ganaderic acids don't taste so good. So we have found that whenever we put reishi in those mushroom magic formulations, the taste just didn't work. So we decided not to do it.
Okay, so there is no Rishi in your morning drink. I'm giving it a sniff first. No, can't really smell anything. Let's see.
Yeah. Ugh. It's not that bitter actually,
It's not too bitter.
but it also doesn't taste good.
No, I wouldn't put that in my morning coffee.
You guys
No,
don't look like you're having like a great time over
no,
here.
Oh, it's getting more bitter now. Well, yeah, it's not nice.
it's not nice. Okay, so there you go. Question answered. There's no Rishi in
Mm.
the mushroom magic.
There's also like a weird, like, sometimes when I'm really sweaty, I sometimes say like I smell kind of goaty,
Mm-hmm.
like this fatty acid thing, like sometimes depending on what I eat, and I'm tasting something that's along those lines, which makes sense because there's a fatty acid in here, sodium caprate. That's the one ingredient we haven't talked about yet, and that's,
Right.
I think, what I'm tasting. Uh,
Hmm.
it's a weird kind of, yeah,
Musty kind of.
musty, animalic, like there's something weird about it. And I think that's the sodium caprate. But sodium caprate is an absorption enhancer. So we put it in there because it does seem to enhance the overall absorption. I'm not sure if there's any direct research showing that sodium caprate enhances the absorption of the ganaderic acids. We just tried it with and without, and it felt stronger with than without. That's something we also recently did with Uricomax. When we put the sodium caprate in, it just felt stronger. It's a nice fatty acid that just acts as a permeation enhancer, and together with, I guess, the ganaderic acids and the triterpenes, it works. So we put a little bit in there to help with overall absorption.
Mm,
But that's, I think, what we're tasting.
yeah.
And then another problem with reishi is because it is so fibrous, it doesn't really mix all too well. The extracts would, but then the extracts also get pretty expensive. I do think maybe in the future we'll do a blend that's maybe more catered towards sleep, and we'll have to do a bit more work on the
Mhm.
actual taste profile, but maybe we can get away with it. And maybe I actually haven't tasted the broken spore powder, but maybe that one isn't too bad. So maybe we could add that. I do know that a lot of people also don't like how Lucidaspore tastes. I personally don't mind it, but our operations manager absolutely hates it from what I remember. It kind of tastes like a little bit cardboardy or something like that. Not that nice.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's one of the reasons we don't have it in the Mushroom Magic.
Okay. Good to know.
And I do think the more I talk, I've been having kind of a caught muscle in my shoulder blade, and that's been a little bit annoying, and it was flaring up on my walk this morning. But that's actually loosening up now. So Whether that is Reishi does have strong inflammation reducing effects too, but it could also be some sort of muscle relaxant effect that Erica is noticing. I actually haven't paid too much attention to that yet, but that
Hmm.
probably plays into the sleep enhancing effects too. Because, for example, one of my recent favorite sleep enhancers is Toromag, which also has a strong muscle relaxing effect. And I think if you can get more comfortable in bed, and especially if you have like a sore muscle and that's acting as a pressure point, if you sleep on your side, which I happen to sleep on this side usually, so probably I will have a better night of sleep tonight because I'm having a bit less soreness, tenderness there. Interesting.
Yeah. Well, aside from the testing and
Hmm.
talking about the different ingredients and the effects, what else is there to discuss about Lucidimax specifically? Or Red Reishi also specifically?
Red Rishi. I think it's interesting to mention a lot of people focus on Rishi for its longevity enhancing effects and some of its calming and mood enhancing effects and sleep enhancing effects. But one thing that's oftentimes missed is that it also seems to enhance neuroplasticity quite a bit, and it interacts both with NGF, nerve growth factor, and BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. So NGF is something that's a target of Arenimax as well. So that's kind of interesting that some of these ganoderic acids also seem to have a somewhat similar effect as the arenosines in lion's mane because they enhance NGF function and also BDNF function, which also enhances neuroplasticity and is good for mood and it's good for memory and just overall neuroprotection, which Rishi is also a really good neuroprotective agent, so that's quite interesting as well. But I think the fact that it can enhance neuroplasticity is really interesting because that means over a long period of time, it could help enhance memory function, focus, mood, all of these things. And I personally really like neuroplasticity enhancers. And when we took the Rishi 9% for a while, we both
Hmm.
felt in really good moods. And
Yeah.
definitely, now that I'm feeling this, and I think I can feel a bit more of an increase in mood now. It's been maybe another 10 minutes or so. So definitely a nice one that maybe I'll try playing around with it a bit more during the day at like one caps instead of two. I have noticed the few times I've taken it right before bed, it kind of puts me into too deep of a sleep, and then I wake up the next day kind of groggy. I sleep really well normally without any aid, really, so it probably just puts me into deep of a sleep. Um,
I'm the exact same way where I sleep really well normally, so I don't typically take any supplements that help with sleep just because it does make me sleep a little too deeply in general, and then I wake up more groggy.
mhm.
But when I did take Lucidimax just to beta test it when we were doing formulations, found that if I took it about 30 minutes before bed, I by the time I was like ready to actually go to sleep, felt pretty relaxed and comfortable. And then I didn't have that groggy feeling in the morning. So
Oh, that's
it
good.
is something you just have to play around with the timing, I guess.
Absolutely. Yeah. It could have also just been that I woke up in the middle of a sleep cycle or something.
Hmm.
That's not always good. So I'll have to try it again. I have had good results with it as well, but just the last time I tried it, it was pretty groggy the next day. Um,
I'm really curious what my sleep score will be tomorrow morning. And I
mhm.
could tell you this in the chat on YouTube when the podcast actually goes live. Um, because I do struggle with sleep quality. So maybe this will help me get a little bit more REM, hopefully a bit more deep sleep, because I really struggle to achieve good deep sleep on a nightly basis.
And what's interesting, if it is really acting as a significant 5-HT2A antagonist, then it should increase both REM and deep sleep primarily. So, and that's I think something people have been seeing. I know Paul's wife, for example, she takes Toromag and Lucidimax and claims it's like one of the best sleep enhancers ever. Uh, which I don't think I've taken them together, but I can imagine you'd really be knocked out after that combination.
Oh,
Mm.
I'm sure. Yeah.
Um, oh, one other thing that's quite interesting about Rishi, something that maybe a lot of people also don't like, men specifically, who want very high DHT levels because it makes you manly and whatever. Rishi is a 5 5-AR inhibitor, so the 5-alpha reductase enzyme. And the 5-alpha reductase enzyme, it converts testosterone to dihydrotestosterone, DHT. So if you inhibit that enzyme, then you get less conversion of testosterone to DHT, which some men don't want because they want to maximize DHT, and then they go towards things like Diascoria niponica, Tribugen, Tribulus terrestris, which all can actually enhance the 5-AR enzyme. But there's also a lot of men who actually don't want high levels of DHT because some men are sensitive to the hair loss effects of DHT. So androgenic alopecia, if you have too high levels of androgen, specifically DHT, you start losing your hair. There's a reason many bodybuilders are bald, for example, because they're usually increasing their DHT levels to very extreme levels. But for your average person, too high of DHT levels can cause some hair loss. I think that the risks are a little bit overblown because there's also a lot of men that I know that take Diascoria niponica, Tribugen, Tribulus terrestris, and are really focused on increasing their DHT levels, and they have a full head of hair. So it's also not a guarantee that if you increase DHT levels, you're going to lose your hair. Anyways, long story short, the 5-AR inhibiting effects of Reishi can then be beneficial if you are experiencing hair loss and you want to knock your DHT levels down, then this is a good one. And DHT levels, when they get too high, can have negative effects on the prostate for some men. So if you're looking for a really good 5-AR inhibitor that also doesn't seem to produce the classic 5-AR inhibitor mood disruptions, there's actually a bunch of different forms of the 5-AR enzyme, and it's kind of unclear which one causes mood issues. But that is a known thing, but it doesn't seem to occur with Rishi from what I've known, what I've taken it myself. Erica has taken it, the 9% Rishi. And the ganoderic acids themselves are the 5-AR inhibitors, so there's definitely something going on there. A lot of people claim that if you inhibit 5-AR, that your libido just immediately tanks. I didn't see this effect. I don't know if you remember that, but there wasn't something that really stood out to me where I'm like, oh, my libido just tanked. And some people say it gives them anhedonia and just really bad mood. I didn't notice that either. When I've been beta testing Lucidimax, it puts me generally in a better mood. When we took the 9% Rishi for a long time, I was in a better mood, so I don't see any problems with it. But of course, if your whole thing is getting your DHT levels as high as possible, and you're also taking things like Tribugen or Diascoria or Tribulus terrestris, then this is going to be counterproductive to your goals. So maybe this is not the right mushroom for you, or maybe you could take it at night and maybe it doesn't impact your daytime DHT levels. I'm not totally sure, but it's a really interesting one, except if you're trying to maximize your DHT levels. Other than that, I would say Rishi is something you should definitely check out because it has a wide scala of effects. You can get inflammation reduction. I have a bit of a sore shoulder blade, like I was saying earlier. That seems to be a little bit better. It seems to help with sleep. So I think Lucidimax is a really interesting one if you are not interested in taking a lot of supplements, but you want something that has wide-ranging effects from immune modulation to sleep enhancement to pain reduction to it could even help you enhance your meditation, like take it before a yoga lesson. I'm sure you'll do better. You'll feel more limber right away. The muscle relaxation is really nice. The slight warmth feeling is nice. This would probably be something I would want to take on an airplane, right? Like maybe this and Toromag and relax my muscles, maybe allow me to sleep in that weird sitting up position on an airplane. Uh, so yeah,
Yeah.
a
Maybe I'll try it
versatile
next
stuff.
time I fly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm curious. I personally really like the muscle relaxants when we fly.
Hmm.
Like Relief-X is a nice one if you fly. Take some of that muscle relaxation. I guess Relief-X and Lucidimax would be nice.
That would be a really powerful combination
Yeah.
if you need to really chill or sleep super well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, this is definitely on probably the more subtle side of perceptible benefits just because we can feel it, but it's not overpowering. Do you feel sleepy right now?
I don't. I do still think the effects are kicking in a little bit more.
Hmm.
They are getting stronger. I would also say, this is a unique experience to take it because I'm trying to remember stuff. I'm trying to be connected to you and to
Hmm.
Ellie, and there's lights on me. I'm looking at a camera.
Mhm.
Our camera just overheated. We had to stop. I'm looking at making sure everything is running properly. So there's some stressors going, which are kind of stimulating. So
Hmm.
if I were to take this outside of this podcast, which I have many times, then the calming effects are a little bit stronger. But I would say, in terms of like raw, acute effects, this is maybe not as strong as something like Reliefix, because when we did the podcast on Reliefix, I think we took a double dose,
Hmm.
and like 45 minutes in or so, I was really struggling to keep focused and keep the story moving, and I was a bit lost in the sauce. That's not happening here, which I guess that's also a really good thing to mention. If you work in an office environment and it is a bit more stimulating, a bit more stressful, this could be really nice. But if, like myself, you work from home completely alone most of the day, there really isn't that much exciting stuff happening, and I'm just chilling. So then if I take some Lucidimax, it can get a little bit too calming. But if I'm
That
in,
would definitely, today I knew if I tried taking it this morning, my bed would be looking a little better than it normally does when I work from home.
yeah.
So couldn't play with that.
Yeah.
And I guess I would say, like, maybe it's not super, super strong right now, but it is 8:30 right now. And my normal bedtime is more at around like 11 or 12, but I could probably go lay down and sleep now, which is very unusual for me.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
if you need to go to bed a little bit earlier, then yeah, in that sense, it's a really good one for me because I do feel my eyelids getting a little bit heavier now. It feels like it's like 10, but it's 8:30.
Yeah.
That's where my energy levels are at. So yeah.
So I'm also curious, and we're all curious to hear, have you tried Lucidimax and what do you use it for? And have you also seen sleep benefits from that too? Let us know in the chat. Let us know in the comments. That brings us to the end of the podcast.
Yeah.
And I really just want to say thanks so much, Ellie, for joining us again and showing the chromatograms and explaining it really clearly and making it also really obvious that if you're looking for quality and you're looking for those intense, strong bioactives, Lucidimax is the one to go for. Um, and if you're curious about other Red Reishi products, we also have some of the other ingredients as standalones. You were
Yeah.
talking about the broken spores, which
We don't, well, we have Lucidaspore. So
Lucidispore. So this is a solution,
it's a
right?
solution and we have soft gels.
Mm-hmm.
But that is an extract. And what we have in Lucidimax is just broken spore powder.
Mm.
So not extracted. So it's going to be different. Lucidaspore is going to be stronger. So if you want to try that out, it's there. If you want to try out the really strong ganoderic acid one, that's also there. It's the Reishi 9% or the ultra potent. I'm not sure what we're calling it at the moment. And then if you want the high beta glucan one, that's just our one-to-one Reishi, and it still has 0.5% of ganoderic acid, which is very impressive. So that's definitely an interesting one to pick up too. Um, hmm,
So there's a bit to choose from,
yeah,
but Lucidimax is really the creme de la creme and the optimized version of this.
absolutely. I would say, as far as I know, this is the best Rishi on the market. I don't want to say that, like, maybe somewhere in China, in some small village where some guy has been growing it and extracting it for 2,000 years. Well,
Not
that
the
guy
same.
probably not, although it is the mushroom
Right.
mentality, so who knows? But just a long tradition of that, and maybe there's some special reserves that's grown in a specific region, and there's some terroir involved. I don't know. But from a modern Western reishi supplement, I don't think there's anything better. I don't think you're going to find anything that has 16 milligrams of ganoderic acid, I think. Let's see.
Mhm. Per serving, yeah.
Yeah, 16 milligrams of ganoderic acids and 6 milligrams of reishi spore triterpenes. So, and that's minimum. It's actually probably going to be higher in most batches. Um,
Definitely.
it, That's really impressive. And that one closing remark, there was a guy on Reddit recently, and he said, "Wow, incredible how well Lucidimax worked. I would have never expected a Reishi supplement to work this well." And my response to him was, "Yeah, isn't it wild that if you just standardize to the bioactives, it actually works?" But
Hmm.
that's how fucking simple it is. I'm getting a little bit animated here because everyone's acting like this is some magic trick that you have to capture some sort of mana from the third moon and harvest it at this altitude. No, none of that matters. Bioactives. Show that the bioactives are there, it will work. Just like with
Exactly.
coffee, if there's no caffeine, it's not going to be stimulating. There's caffeine there, it's stimulating. Same thing with reishi. The ganaderic acids are there, it's going to do something. That's how simple it is. And it's
Hmm.
hard to find good suppliers if you're looking in the dark and you don't have any analytics to guide you. But if you have analytics to guide you, it can be pretty straightforward to find a good supplier. And then if you work with them for many years and you respect them and they respect you, then you can do stuff like we're doing. So that is one thing I will say. There's probably no one who can pull off that 14% ganaderic acid reishi. Now, that is a custom extract being made for us. I don't think anyone else has access to that. And it's there because we wanted it and we convinced our partners to develop this with us. And that
Hmm.
is something that I would say to anyone out there, develop relationships with people in China because there is a whole world of expertise that is pretty much untapped by most of us because we're just buying their cheapest crap and then upmarking it and making $7 million a month on TikTok Shop. And then you can drive around in your Lamborghini and look like a giant douchebag selling really bad quality products. But if you actually care about the products, then you need to build these relationships. You need people like Ellie on the team who can do the analytics. You need to understand your products. You need people like myself who can then tell you, okay, this is why you want the ganaderic acids in there. And if that's not there, you're not going to have effective products. And you're going to be making a lot of money because you're buying crap from China and selling it at a huge markup, or you're doing your own mycelium on grain, which, you know, we've grown some mushrooms at home and you've seen mycelium on grain. It's so easy. Like
Mm-hmm.
my whole house could be full of little pint jars of mycelium. You don't have to pay any attention to the environment really. It has to be at a stable temperature, but it doesn't matter if it's super clean. It doesn't matter if it's at a certain humidity. You don't have to harvest it at a certain time. You just let it roll. I could make probably like 100 kilos a month of mycelium on grain in our small apartment. So it's understandable why that's being done. And from a profit margin standpoint, it makes a lot of sense to be doing that. But from an effects standpoint, from a feeling good about yourself at the end of the day and being like, hey, we put a product on the market that's delivering 16 milligrams of ganaderic acids while everyone else except real mushrooms doesn't even have any ganaderic acids. That's rewarding. Maybe not the best for
Hmm.
business, but we need people like ourselves in this industry to push things forward and maybe not always think about making 7 million bucks a month on TikTok Shop, which I
Exactly.
still can't get over how weird that is.
So for the real ones who want to experience the real power of ganaderic acid, try Lucidimax.
Yes.
And thanks for listening to In Search of Insight. We hope you will share this podcast with your other mushroom nerd friends. And don't forget to say hello to us in the chat, ask your questions, also on Reddit, r/Nootropics Depot. And until next month, we will see you then. So bye bye for now.
Yeah.
See ya.
Hi, everyone.